Well, hello all. In the Old Covenant or Old Testament, there are said to be 613 laws, and some people divide this into the moral law, like the Ten Commandments, all the right things to do, and then you get the civil law, like what happens if your ox gores somebody else, how much must you pay them? And then you got the ceremonial part of the law, which is related to the priests, the Levites, and the temple service and the sacrifices. So today I want to talk about what was the importance of the ceremonial part of the law, which many Christians say, that's just done away with. That's definitely done away with as part of the old covenant and has no further use. All those sacrifices, the temple service, the Levitical priestly, this, that, and the other. And so, what was its importance in the life of the ancient people of Israel? Well, there's a thing called the scientific method where if you're going to perform an experiment, you have an experiment and you have the control. And when you look at ancient Israel, under Solomon, now these people had been a fairly homogeneous group of 12 tribes. When Solomon went slightly wrong, I think with Rehoboam and Jeroboam, the kingdom of it split into Israel in the north and Judah in the south. So it split into two entirely different kingdoms ruled over by different kings. And in the Judah kingdom, which is the southernmost part and which had Jerusalem as its capital, you found there was a temple service, there was a Levitical priesthood, and there was a ceremonial practices of the law were being conducted regularly. So they would keep the feasts in Jerusalem, the Levites would preach and teach, they would perform sacrifices, there was religious instruction, there was singing to God and praise by the Levites, etc. Whereas in the nation of Israel, they didn't have any of this temple. They didn't have a temple. They didn't have temple service. They didn't have the instruction by the Levites in religious duty, etc. And it's interesting, we got this perfect experiment and control. It's like a perfect scientific method you see. You see that in the kingdom of Judah, about half the time the kings are reasonable and good. And in the kingdom of Israel, which is the control, where they didn't have the ceremonial part of the law, they didn't apply it, you find all the kings did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. So we see that, as I say, with a temple and with the priests and the Levitical system to balance out, and the king. So the king couldn't just do whatever he liked, and he couldn't have whatever religion he wanted, and he couldn't just follow the pagan practices like they did in the northern kingdom of Israel. In the northern kingdom of Israel, they were basically lost. These people just copied what the inhabitants around them did. They forsook the law that had been given to them, and which their neighbor Judah was still a lot of the time obeying, and there was a temple. They were keeping the feast, they were keeping the Sabbath days, they were doing according to a lot of the Old Testament, the 613 laws, not perfectly, but they were trying. And so half the time you see that the kings of Judah did what was right in the sight of the Lord, and in almost with perhaps the one exception of Jehu, who was a pretty dodgy kind of a king of Israel. He's the only exception. He did kind of marginally. Could you call him right? Okay, let's call him a little bit right. But all the other kings did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So God eventually just sent Israel fairly long, sent them into captivity, into Assyrian captivity, because they'd completely forsaken him. And they knew about God. They'd had the exact same start as the kingdom of Judah, but the kingdom of Judah just did a lot better. And the reason was they had the ceremonial law. So you could see the importance of the ceremonial law, which taught all about God, which emphasized the laws of God, which when you bring sacrifices and you have a whole caste system, the Levites, to talk about God and to teach God and to sing about God and to perform services in the temple. It kept the people in line, and it kept them, the king, in line, and it kept them fairly, well, obeying God to some extent. So there's this perfect scientific experiment which you could see was performed where you have the ceremonial law, people did well. You don't have the ceremonial law under the old covenant in the nation of Israel, they did terribly, and they just followed the pagan customs of the people around them, and they eventually went into captivity quite early, into Assyrian captivity. Okay, Judah did go into Babylonian captivity, but they came back. Whereas the nation of the 10 tribes of Israel, the northern kingdom, just the people disappeared. They called the lost 10 tribes of Israel. So the ceremonial law even ensured when the nation of Judah came back into the Holy Land, the ceremonial law ensured that the Jewish nation continued. So the Jews and the Levites and I think the tribe of Benjamin were in the southern kingdom, and then you had all the other sons of Jacob that were forming part of the northern kingdom: Dan, Ephraim, Manasseh, Reuben, Gad. I'm just trying to think of some of those other names. All those people, Asher, were Naphtali. They were part of the northern kingdom, and those that were the lost 10 tribes of Israel. And yeah, the ceremonial law, in fact, seemed to cement and continue the Jewish nation. So not only did it help the kings to do right when they obeyed it, but it also seemed to play a very important part in forming the culture of the Jewish nation. And while they seem to be while they seem to do the ceremonial law and to put emphasis on it, they seem to do better. I just want to show you a website which shows how the various kings did poorly or well under the ceremonial law. So let me just see if I can find that quickly. So let's just see if we can move this around. So here we see the kings of Judah. So it started with Saul, Ishbosheth, David, Solomon. Then the kingdom split into the kings of Judah and the kings of Israel. And they have a color code, and this means this color, I'm colorblind, but it means that they did well. This means they did somewhat well. So just have a look. All of these did evil, did evil, did evil, did evil, did evil, until we come to Jehu mixed, and then all the rest of the kings of Israel did evil. There's not a single one that did all right. So here, if we look at Rehoboam and so on, did evil, did evil. Okay, did right, did right. Did evil, did evil, did evil. Did right in his youth and evil in the old age. Did right in his youth and evil in his old age. So somewhat right. Did right. Did right. Did evil, did right, did evil, did evil. Did right, and then did evil, did evil, did evil, did evil, and then the kingdom of Judah also ended. But for a long time, you can see almost about half the time, the kings of Judah did what was right in the sight of the Lord. So I think this is a fascinating experiment which was performed and shows the importance of the ceremonial law under the Old Covenant.